Howdy, folks. I'm fixing to tell y'all about Texas, nicknamed the Lone Star State.
I'm particularly fond of these. I pulled them out of a place on Midgard called Texas.
Don't mess with Texas?
That's the message.
I'm Walker, and I'm Texas Ranger.
Taxi? I mean, anything for Salinas.
Welcome to this week's episode of Texas Slang for Crazy. This week we are discussing the prestige and the drama behind the Pearl District in San Antonio. If you spent much time downtown in San Antonio, chances are you've heard of the Pearl District. Made up of luxury condos, fashionable restaurants, stores, and the gorgeous Emma Hotel, this area has become quite popular. There are holiday programs, including a huge party for Dia de los Muertos and Christmas, and weekly children's events. Farmers markets decorate the weekend, and there's always something fun to do. In the background, however, are familiar smokestacks, and there's a definite vibe of repurpose. That's because the Pearl used to be one of San Antonio and Texas's most popular breweries. Are you ready for some drama? Because this story involves theft, shady business practices, murder, mental institutions, and eventually redemption. The Pearl Brewery was in operation for 115 years under multiple names. Yes, even during Prohibition, but a little more about that later. However, none of this would be possible without the German, Czech, and other European settlers that came to Texas. The short and sweet is that Germans wanted their beer. William Menger opened the first brewery in San Antonio along with Charles Dagan. The Menger Bar is still open today and one of the best places in Texas to get a drink, if I can brag about my city for a minute. Dagan and Menger started with ale because it was difficult to get temperatures cold enough to brew lager. In nearby New Braunfels, another German and Czech destination, Winter was brewing just enough in the way of cold temperatures to make lager happen. Suddenly, there were multiple people on the brewing scene. Joroslav Belodrowski came from St. Louis to open City Brewery. Adolphus Busch came to open the Lone Star Brewing Association. Refrigeration technology came along, and the lower temperatures for lager could finally be maintained. Belodrowski was starting to do okay, but had very little in the way of funding. The biggest challenge was when he was accused of embezzling over $1,700 from when he was back in Chicago. While there was no evidence of this, he had to hire an attorney. Oscar Bergstrom stepped in and saved Belodrowski from prison, but the investors for City Brewing were leaving in droves, and the brewery went up for sale with the sheriff's office. Oscar Bergstrom bought it for very little money, right out from under his client's nose. Bergstrom and his friend Otto Kohler went into business together, but Bergstrom would still spend most of his time away, and while the board of directors was very rarely involved in day-to-day running of the brewery, Otto Kohler was much more involved. Kohler was working for the competition in the very beginning. Set up at Lone Star Brewery, Otto was learning the business. He made a trip to his homeland to buy a very special beer recipe. This would be known as XXX Pearl. The X's are an indicator of the quality, so this was considered to be super high grade and not something dirty. The Pearl name came from the description of the bubbles in the beer. Back in New York, Oscar Bergstrom's business practices were coming under fire. Alamo Industries, as it had become known, barred Bergstrom from the premises of the brewery and would not allow him to take part in company decisions. One of the weirdest parts of the Pearl Brewery history is that most of the successful years were preceded by a murder. Emma and Otto Kohler were German immigrants who moved to San Antonio. According to belief in 1910, Emma Kohler, Emma K. from here on out, was in an automobile accident and ended up bedridden. She desperately needed help, so Otto hired a good-looking nurse, also named Emma Domke, Emma D. from here on out. She went by Emmy, though, so I guess that kind of helps us tell the story. Cue the obvious and devastating love affair. Otto moved Emmy into a love cottage. Her friend moved in with her. This is our third Emma, Emma Bergmeister, Emma B. Otto Kohler ended up having affairs with both of the cottage Emmas, Emma B and D. This went on for a hot minute until 1914 when an argument ensued and one of the Emmas, Emma B, shot him. The police arrived to the explanation of, "I'm sorry, but I had to kill him." She bailed out for a while to be a nurse in World War I before surprisingly coming back to stand trial. The all-male jury found her not guilty. Emma Kohler, Emma K., couldn't take this lying down, and made a full recovery. She took over running the brewery. During Prohibition, she continued to make the brewery money by bottling cream soda, making near beer, and converting operations to dry cleaning and auto repair, so her whole workforce stayed employed. One of the main portions of the brewery is now the Emma Hotel, named for Mrs. Kohler. The most expensive suite at the hotel, which is rented out for up to $7,500 a night, has a private patio and an outdoor fireplace and is bigger than most condos in town at 2,500 square feet. It is known as the Emma Suite. Unfortunately, Oscar Bergstrom decided that he was owed something. His personal debts were high, and the brewery's profit margins were just keeping them out of bankruptcy in 1921. Bergstrom filed a suit in the 37th Judicial Court and asked for access to the brewery grounds. The court would file against Bergstrom, as though he was not allowed to make any decisions. The brewery had consulted him before any major decisions was made, so unfortunately, he was allowed back on the grounds. After Prohibition, Otto A. Kohler, the nephew of Emma Kay, helped reorganize the San Antonio Brewing Association and became the head of the brewery into the Golden Age. He loved to hunt and even created a safari room to show off his kills. In the 1950s, the name changed from the San Antonio Brewing Association to the Pearl Brewery. It was the largest brewery in Texas and would continue to grow until the 60s. Unfortunately, at that point, Otto had died and Southdown Corporation purchased the company. For the first time in 80 years, the brewery was not owned by Kohlers, and the decline was swift. It didn't help that Otto A. Kohler's son, Otto A. Kohler Jr., had been committed to a mental institution. This became a crazy situation when Jr. fought his mother's conservatorship and claimed he'd been put in the institution against his will. He was let out after it was discovered that the Brady Hospital, where he'd been staying, had a habit of imprisoning relatives of the wealthy. Otto A. Kohler was released, but died just a year later. With Southdown Corporation in charge, maintenance was not as strict, and there was a lot of spending at the Pearl Brewery. At the end of the 70s, it was sold to Paul Kalmanovnitz's General Brewing, which later became Pabst Brewing for all of our hipster friends. The new owners had kind of a strange group of regional breweries and were more focused on exposure and the status of being an owner. And then the brand pretty much died, and the employees were let go. The Pearl Brewery closed for good in 2001. This could be a sad story, but in 2002, Christopher Kit Goldsberry bought the facility and all of its buildings to create one of the coolest locations in San Antonio's downtown. You will now know this as the Pearl District. Thank you so much for listening. If you want to see pictures of the Pearl, we'll have them at our Instagram, which is txslingforcrazy. You can email us at txslingforcrazy@gmail.com. Find us on Facebook at texasslingforcrazy.com. And please